We continue then to get reaction to the president's address tonight. We cross live to Cape Town now. Newzroom Africa's reporter Athi Mtongana, who's with the DA spokesperson, Siviwe Gwarube. Athi, good evening to you. What are we learning tonight?
A very good evening to you, Tab. I'm going to jump straight into conversation with the newly elected spokesperson for the Democratic Alliance. Siviwe, thank you so much. I think this is the first time I'm speaking to you as the new spokesperson for the party. Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
But then, Siviwe, the Western Cape, I'm going to begin here. So we have all these restrictions in as far as beaches are concerned in all these other provinces. And then you have the Western Cape, where the Garden Route and the Eastern Cape beaches have been closed, right? And then you have the Cape Metropole, which is seeing a resurgence and a spike in COVID-19 cases. The HOD for health in this province today, we spoke to them, and they also spoke about the spike in the Cape Winelands, in the Cape Metropole, but yet your beaches like Camps Bay and all these other beaches in Cape Town will remain open. What is the situation there?
Look, I think the Western Cape government has done a considerable amount to be able to build health system capacity, Athi, in particularly in these parts that you've mentioned. And while, yes, we've seen an increase, what now is going to be required from the province is essentially effective monitoring and effective enforcement of these protocols and these regulations which have been imposed. And the reality is that we are in the Western Cape in a better off position than we can see in certain parts, for instance, of the Eastern Cape in terms of health system capacity. And so if we are to partner up with the people of the Western Cape and the visitors to the Western Cape to say to them that while these remain open, they are also subject to change. If we don't change our behavior and if we don't make sure that we work with government in order for us to be able to keep these numbers down.
Behavioral patterns are what got us to this point. The president tonight said the fact that people are not adhering to these safety precautions are the reason why we're experiencing the second wave. So how then do you trust the members of the public or rely on behavioral patterns to not overload the health system in the Western Cape that you're saying is well enough and capable?
But it's important, Athi, there's no way, whether nationally speaking, whether in the Western Cape or anywhere in the country, there's absolutely no way that government can do this on its own. And I think the president was quite harsh and even said in this evening's address that if people don't change their behaviors, many of their family members that they're seeing today will not be here next year. It's a harsh reminder, but it's absolutely critical. Because ultimately, Athi, we also have to balance out being able to open establishments, to be able to open air spaces like beaches, so that people who live in areas where they aren't able to necessarily social distance are able to go to open air areas to be able to enjoy this festive season in a way that is safe. But that can only happen if we are in touch and if we are working in as a partnership with the people who go to these areas in order to celebrate. But we also welcome the president's differentiated approach in applying the curfew that has been imposed. We know that a lot of the spike in the cases have been due to the rising, we've seen a lot of parties which have been gatherings, large gatherings. So we welcome the limitation of the number of people that can gather in any space. We welcome that the responsibility is on people who run these events to make sure that people are compliant. And also we welcome that there is a differentiated approach in terms of the curfew, where establishments may be able to remain open while at the same time there is a curfew in place. Because ultimately, Athi, our economy has been devastated by the past year. And there are people who have lost jobs and are unlikely to ever get them back. And so we are in this precarious position now where the health system capacity across the country has not been able to catch up in order to be able to deal with the numbers that we are seeing. And so we've got to have this balancing act where we are saying we're wanting to save livelihoods as well, because actually they cost us lives.
The Democratic Alliance has been calling for that exactly, an open economy, due to the devastating impact and people losing their jobs. Now, obviously, it has made presentations before the NCCC to say, what will we do in the event that things get out of control? For instance, the Eastern Cape beaches closed. We know that there's a lot of interprovincial traveling between these two provinces. A lot of people are going to be now flocking to the Western Cape, particularly Cape Town, where the beaches are going to be open. We know how people are very excited for the festive season, and therefore they can't imagine a festive season without being at the beach. So what are the plans there to ensure that it doesn't get out of hand?
I think one of the key things that I think that the president mentioned, which was critical, and I think that the Western Cape pushed really hard for this, where we were saying that the enforcement of the existing regulations needs to be harsher and that there needs to be consequences. Because actually, the reality is that while we've had regulations that have been in place, in certain instances they have not been harshly implemented and there have not been real consequences for people who don't adhere to them. And so we don't support the restriction of interprovincial travel because, again, I mean, our country has a history of, a history that is taken from our past where people live in cities and they come from rural areas. And so a lot of people don't get to go home at the end of the year. And so we are pleading with people, obviously, that if they can limit travel, then don't go home. Don't travel to rural parts of the country where the Eastern Cape is struggling with capacity. But at the same time, we think that closing down the borders of provinces would have been devastating to South Africa from an economic point of view. So we welcome that that hasn't been done. But ultimately, Athi, it's going to be very important that people come to the party. We were also very concerned that there was very little detail provided to us by the president on the vaccine plan. All that he managed to say is that they are seized with the matter. The reality is that we are seeing other countries around the world talking about how they are rolling out their vaccine, what is their plan, how and when it will be received.
The 10% that's coming next year?
Ultimately, Athi, we should have had an entire plan that is presented to the country to say, this is how we're going to be managing to protect our healthcare workers and the most vulnerable. And this is the plan that's going to be rolled out. And ultimately, there wasn't enough of that detail that came through from the president tonight.
Siviwe, I would like to continue this conversation with you because we're running out of time. Thank you so much, Siviwe Gwarube, the spokesperson for the Democratic Alliance. We'll have to leave it there for now due to time constraints. Thabo, back to you in studio.
Team Mtongana, thank you. Tonight live for us there in Cape